Today we're going to talk about the moment the party stopped. We're looking at the 1929 stock market crash and the decade of devastation that followed it, the Great Depression.
Right. And our goal here is to really understand how the Roaring Twenties, a time of just incredible confidence and prosperity, could build an economy so fragile that it shattered almost overnight. We want to look at how speculation turned into, well, into poverty for millions.
Okay, so let's set the scene. The 1920s. It really felt like an endless boom. The U.S. economy was just expanding massively.
It really was. Factories were running at full tilt, new jobs were everywhere, and people were making more money than they ever had.
And it was all about the new technology, right? The things people were buying for their homes.
Exactly. Cars, radios, refrigerators. These weren't just gadgets. They were symbols of a new way of life. They created this immense confidence that the American system was just unbeatable.
And that confidence spilled over into the stock market. The feeling was that anyone, not just the super rich, could get in on the action. One source we saw said people believe this time of plenty would never come to an end.
That belief was intoxicating, and it changed the market from, a place for serious investment into something more like a national casino.
So you have millions of ordinary people jumping in, and they don't really get the risks. They just see the prices going up and up.
And that very demand is what created the bubble. The more people wanted to buy, the higher the prices went, but it had nothing to do with how much the companies were actually worth. It was all excitement.
And to fuel that, people needed money they didn't actually have. Which brings us to this really risky idea. Buying on margin.
Ah, yes. Buying on margin. This is the absolute heart of the failure.
Okay, so break that down for us. How did this turn what could have been a normal market drop into a complete avalanche?
Well, buying on margin is basically gambling with borrowed money. An investor would only pay for a tiny fraction of the stock's price with their own cash, maybe 10%.
Just 10%.
Sometimes even less. The rest of it, the other 90%, was a loan from their stockbroker. They were betting the stock would rise enough to pay back the loan and still make a huge profit.
Sounds like a cheat code for making money, but the risk. I mean, what happens if the stock price drops by 10%?
That's the trap. You don't just lose the $100 you put in, you still owe the full $900 you borrowed. The broker makes what's called a margin call.
A margin call, so they're calling to get their money back.
Immediately. They demand you pay back the loan right now. And since most people didn't have that kind of cash just lying around, they were forced to sell their stock at any price they could get.
Which, of course, pushes the price down even further, and it just snowballs.
It snowballs. It's a perfect mechanism for creating a panic. And what's wild is that the cracks in the real economy were already showing long before Wall Street noticed.
That's a great point. So this didn't just come out of a clear blue sky. What were the warning signs?
Well, for one, the farmers were in deep trouble. After World War I, European demand for American crops fell off a cliff, and prices for things like wheat and corn just collapsed.
And what about the factories? Weren't they still producing all those cars and radios?
They were, but they were producing too much. They'd reached a saturation point. Most families who could afford those things already had them, and wages for everyone else weren't rising fast enough to buy more. So inventory was piling up.
So you have struggling farmers and slowing factories. At the same time, the wealth gap was getting wider, right?
Hugely. The profits of the 20s were mostly going to the very top. A few experts were ringing the alarm bells saying stock prices were insane, but, nobody wanted the party to stop.
And then the party did stop. It started on Black Thursday, October 24th, 1929. The market opened and prices just dropped sharply.
And that sent a wave of pure fear through the system. All those people who had bought on margin suddenly realized they might get that dreaded margin call.
So they rushed to sell.
Everyone rushed to sell at once.
Yeah.
And there were hardly any buyers, so prices just spiraled down.
But I remember reading there was an attempt to stop the bleeding, right? The bankers stepped in.
Yes, a group of powerful New York bankers tried to be the heroes. They pooled their money and started publicly buying huge blocks of stock to show confidence. And for a moment, it seemed to work. It calmed things down over the weekend.
Just for a moment, though.
Just for a moment. The fear was too deep. When the markets opened the next week, especially on Black Tuesday, October 29th, that's when the floor completely fell out.
Black Tuesday. That's the day everyone remembers.
That was the total collapse. A record 16 million shares were traded. And here's a crazy detail. The technology of the day couldn't handle it.
You mean the ticker tapes?
Exactly. The ticker tapes that printed out the stock prices were running hours behind the actual trades. People were selling their life savings completely blind, with no idea what the current price was.
So that just fueled the panic even more. You're just selling to get anything you can.
Anything. By the end of that day, billions and billions of dollars in wealth had just vanished. And that was the official start of the Great Depression.
So if you're a person who never owned a single stock, you might think, this doesn't affect me. But it did. And it did so almost instantly because of the banks.
That's the next domino to fall. Banks weren't just holding your savings, they were using your money to invest in that very same overinflated stock market. When the market crashed, their investments were wiped out.
And people figured this out pretty quickly, which led to the bank runs.
The bank runs. It's a terrifying image. You hear a rumor your bank is in trouble, and you physically run there with everyone else in town trying to pull out all your cash at the same time.
And the banks just don't have that much physical cash on hand. They've loaned most of it out.
Right, so the first few people in line get their money, and then the bank closes its doors. Forever.
And there was no insurance back then. If the bank failed, your life savings were just gone.
Completely gone. Millions of families lost everything overnight. And when people have no savings, they stop spending money, which means businesses have no customers.
And no customers means layoffs.
Mass layoffs. The numbers are just staggering. By 1933, 1 in every 4 workers in the country was unemployed. 25%.
It's hard to even imagine. Life became about pure survival. You see those famous photos of people standing in long, long lines for a bowl of soup?
And if you couldn't pay your rent, you were evicted. People started building these little shanty towns on the edges of cities out of cardboard and scrap metal. They bitterly called them Hoovervilles after the president.
And even if you were lucky enough to keep your job, your wages were probably cut dramatically. Families were just holding on by a thread.
Kids were often pulled out of school to find any kind of work. People started growing their own food in tiny gardens. It was a complete change in the fabric of American life.
It also led to this huge migration of people, right?
Yep.
Just constantly moving, looking for work.
A whole generation of people on the move, riding in empty train cars, chasing rumors of a job in the next town over, just hoping for a break.
And as if all that wasn't enough, for farmers, it got even worse. They got hit with a second disaster.
A natural one. The Dust Bowl.
So you have the economic crash, which had already destroyed crop prices. And then on top of that, the weather turns against you.
Exactly. A massive long-term drought hit the Great Plains. Years of farming had loosened the topsoil, and when the rains stopped, it just turned to dust.
And the wind came.
The wind came. These huge black blizzards of dust would just roll across the landscape, burying houses, burying farm equipment. It made millions of acres of farmland completely useless.
So you can't grow crops, you can't pay your loans, and you lose your farm, a farm that might have been in your family for generations.
And that's what triggered that massive migration west, particularly to California. Hundreds of thousands of families, often called Okies, just packed up and left, hoping to find work, picking fruit, or any kind of manual labor.
Now, this wasn't just an American problem, was it? It spread.
Oh, it went global and fast. The U.S. was the world's biggest economy, so when it collapsed, it pulled everyone else down with it.
How did that happen? Through trade?
Trade and finance, yes. But then countries made a really bad situation even worse. The U.S. passed something called the Smoot-Hawley Tariff in 1930.
Which was meant to protect American businesses by making imported goods really expensive.
Right. But the predictable result was that every other country immediately retaliated. They slapped huge taxes on American goods.
So international trade just seized up.
It basically stopped. It fell by something like 2/3. Factories closed all over the world. It truly became a Great Depression, a global one.
The scale of the suffering, it's just immense. And it forced a complete rethinking of the government's role in the economy.
It had to. The legacy of 1929 is all the safeguards we now have that were designed specifically to prevent that kind of collapse from happening again.
Like what? What were the big changes?
Well, first, they regulated the stock market. They created the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, basically to be the police of Wall Street, to enforce transparency and prevent that kind of wild speculation.
And what about the banks?
Yeah.
How did they fix the bank run problem?
This was maybe the most important fix. They created the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. It meant your savings in a bank were insured by the federal government.
So even if your bank fails, your money is safe.
Your money is safe. And that single move restored trust in the banking system almost overnight.
And finally, the government created a social safety net.
Yeah, for the first time, really. Things like Social Security to provide income for the elderly and unemployment insurance to give you a cushion if you lose your job.
Before 1929, the government just didn't do those things.
No, the idea was that the economy would take care of itself. Afterwards, the understanding was that it's too fragile. The government has to play a role in providing stability and protecting people.
The Great Depression was a scar that lasted for more than a decade. It really took the massive spending for World War II to finally pull the country out of it.
It did. And it taught us that financial markets need watching and that unchecked speculation can have devastating real-world consequences for everyone.
And that leaves us with a final thought for you. The tools of the 1920s, like buying on margin, that leverage, still exists today in different forms. So when you see markets booming, how can you tell if it's real growth or if we're just betting on unstoppable momentum? And are the safeguards we built 90 years ago strong enough to handle it?
Good luck with your studies.